Good morning, everyone. On this chilly, almost wintry feel today, certainly a fall feel today. But thank you for being here in the Abbey, and also from your own homes, joining remotely. Today, what I want to talk about is compassion. Compassion. The last time we got together, I was talking about having an intimate practice, and really having an intimate practice, I think, is absolutely necessary for embodying a compassionate life. So I want to try to weave those together today, this morning, and then hopefully I won't talk too long and I'll have a chance to have some discussion about this very important topic, and one that at times it seems to me like is not given enough attention, maybe in our Zen tradition, But anyway, so that's what I want to talk about today. And one thing is that we need, in order to have an intimate practice and have it be able to deal with this life compassionately, we have to be willing to not buffer ourselves or push ourselves away from reality in areas that are difficult for us. So most of us, I think it's a human characteristic, and not just for humans, but for other animals, organisms, plants as well, is that when there's pain or difficulty, to kind of push it away, to recoil from it like that. And as we talked about last time, we were talking about having an intimate practice, was to try a very counterintuitive approach, which was to maybe not be able to embrace hardships in our life and difficulties and challenges in our life, but be able to open up to them anyway, to open them and see what that really feels like, and be able to, again, Zen is a body-centered practice, and to be able to really deeply and intimately experience these various feelings, even though they're things that we wouldn't necessarily choose. And in order to be compassionate in my own life, I've found that it's very important, first of all, to be able to, I've been reminded of the quote from Dogen, that to study the Buddha, to study the life of the Buddha is to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self, and then to forget the self is to be enlightened by the 10,000 things in this universe. And so this process of doing that, time we spend on the cushion in our zazen, is certainly extremely helpful to getting to know ourselves better. Things come up when we're on the cushion, things that may be very difficult to accept or deal with, or make our bodies feel in ways that we're not particularly comfortable with. Could have anxiety, could have fear, or different things that come up. Of course, we could have a lot of wonderful, we have some blissful moments that come up too, and just be able to be open to all that. But throughout that process, sitting on the cushion, doing zazen on the cushion, or even off of the cushion, we're getting to know ourselves better and better and more intimately. And I think that is the first step, at least for me, in building my being compassionate in this world. Because once I get to know myself and know my many challenges and things that are difficult for me and challenging for me and enjoyable for me, all these different things, then I can have compassion for myself. And if I don't have compassion for myself, if I'm building or keeping a wall between what I perceive as me and all of you out there, or at home, here, whatever, other places in the universe, I have not been able to really be compassionate when I haven't had that. I can do things like, well, I need to do I'm gonna go donate blood today, and that'll be a good thing. And that's because I care about people. But and that's great. I'm glad that I donated blood or whatever. But if it's sort of a technique-y thing where I'm a Zen student and I want to do things to help people, not quite sure what to do, but I need to do it, that's can very quickly flip to, I'm not doing enough, I'm not good enough, I feel shame in my life because I'm not as good a person or as good a Zen student, or I'm not as compassionate as I should be. But the kind of compassion I'm talking about is not sort of a bougie version of compassion, Although, if it's helping people, I'm certainly not going to tell people not to do it. But in my life, as I get to know myself better, warts and all, and actually have a real feeling of compassion for myself and my own challenges, that really has set the table then for being able to feel a connection with other people and feel this deep connection and have that just seem much more natural in my life. There's another thing it's about as we get to know ourselves better too. There's another element. One way is to in dealing in a compassionate way with this world. We can look at oversimplifying a little bit, but we can look at things from a relative standpoint and from an absolute standpoint. So as I'm getting to know myself on the cushion and off the cushion, it's certainly helpful to have some kind of feel for, my boss at work, I really don't care for her very much. She just rubs me the wrong way. I'm uncomfortable when I'm around her. I don't think she's a very good boss, and she's certainly not somebody that I care for. By the way, this is hypothetical. I'm retired, so it's definitely hypothetical. But have those kind of feelings. But at the same time, and those kind of feelings can come up at the strangest times. They could come up in sesshin, they can come up in our daily sitting, they can come up off the cushion. But at the same time, we have, through our zazen, the ability to, in stillness, that stillness can be very, very healing, and that stillness builds connection. And this to be connected in this world, to be connected deeply in this world, is fundamental for me anyway in feeling compassion, both to myself and others. So as I said, first get to know myself better, can do that on the cushion and off the cushion, but be willing to really look closely at what I am and who I am in different kind of moments. But in doing that and understanding some more about and being curious about who I am, also as I'm sitting and sitting in that stillness, I'm experiencing more and more. It's incremental. It's not, for me, doesn't tend to be just a bolt of lightning, but it tends to be incremental and just feel more and more of a deep connection with everything. And as I feel the deep connection with everything, it's with not just others, not just things that I perceive maybe at one level to be out there, but things don't seem to be so out there. They just seem to be. And so that also is a backdrop, a fundamental part of, I begin to see, of what I am, that makes it just makes it natural to care about other individuals, to care about the planet, to care about things, to care about insentient things and taking care of them, whatever. And so coming from this, getting to know myself better and getting to know myself better from a relative standpoint of the kind of person I have and the way I react to things, but also getting to know myself better from an absolute standpoint and beginning to see that, hey, I'm really not separate from any of these other people or things anyway, so why would I not want to help out? I may have told this story to somebody before, but I was in a retreat one time years ago, and a gentleman was sitting next to me, and he had not sat very much before, I found out later. But anyway, the person in the zendo, after about half a day of sitting, the person in the zendo sneezed, and the gentleman sitting next to me said, "Excuse me." And so again, there was something going on there where he felt such a connection, and this is a non-intellectual connection. He felt such a connection to everybody that when this person sneezed, he thought that he had sneezed. Okay, and then he later realized, oh, I hadn't, and he was just bringing that up with me later, and I thought that was, and he said, yeah, that was crazy. But it just happened. He just, excuse me, and then he was like embarrassed. He said, quickly followed with that. So again, kind of vacillating as we do between absolute and relative. Here is this absolute experience, and at the same time, almost feels ashamed of it because he interrupted maybe people's sitting a little bit. There's excuse me. No, sorry. Bad joke. There's a koan that I wanted to share with you, and it's from the Book of Equanimity, And it's case 54, Ungan's Great Compassionate One. Ungan's Great Compassionate One. And let me just read this to you. And then I want to get into a little bit more as it relates to our life. Ungan asked Dogo, what does the great compassionate bodhisattva do when she uses her manifold hands and eyes? It's like a person reaching behind themselves at night to search for a pillow. Ungan said, I understand. Dogo said, what do you understand? Ungan said, all over the body are hands and eyes. Dogo said, you really said it. You got 80% of it. Ungan said, elder brother, how about you? Dogo replied, throughout the body are hands and eyes. Okay? So this is a koan that is certainly dealing with this idea of compassion and references Avalokiteshvara, this great compassionate bodhisattva who also goes by other names like Kuan Yin as well, or Keizan. But anyway, the just a little background on the on Avalokiteshvara, that she is the mother of all Buddhas, person that sees, a being that sees the cries of the world. Is part of the legend of Avalokiteshvara. It's said that in feeling the pain, the suffering of all the world, literally her head just burst. And her spiritual father, Amitabha, put her back together again, and this time gave her 9 heads with 1,000 arms, and each of her hands had an eye in the palm. So she had this capability then to be there, to reach out, to feel not all the pain and suffering of the world, and also be there to be with it, to be fully present with that. And in this koan, these two great teachers actually that were having this discussion, one talks about they reference Avalokiteshvara and talk about, well, so is it that all over her body are hands and eyes that can feel the suffering of everybody, or is it throughout the body are hands and eyes? Is it through? Is it are? And they're just kind of talking back and forth about this and what's the best way to present it. And individual Dogo says, no, it's throughout the body are hands and eyes. Okay, and the conversation, it's not just on, but throughout it all. But as Shishin Roshi points out in his commentary of the koans in the Book of Equanimity, he said that the Buddha said that these senses that we have, they're really interchangeable. They're not to put too much emphasis on. This is me seeing, this is me hearing, this is me touching, this is me smelling, but really we are experiencing this moment, this reality, in ways that can't be pigeonholed specifically into senses. That's breaking up the totality of what this existence is, okay? And that does not reflect reality. And so rather than, we can move more to a standpoint of just raw experiencing of whatever this is and not really feel the need to label it. And certainly in this koan, the need to say, well, you got 80% of it right, or you've got 100% or whatever. These are two great teachers that are talking and sharing thoughts about this. But the real point too is that we have, much like Avalokiteshvara, we have this manifold hands, arms, eyes, head. We can be sensitive. We can be tuned in to the suffering of the world too, right? In fact, legend aside of Avalokiteshvara, who are her hands? Who are her eyes? Who are her senses? Who is it? It's my hands, it's your hands, it's our senses, right? But it's not just limited to my hands in this sense. It's limited to the totality of this body, and our body, as we see in our practice, is a lot more spacious, a lot more expansive, a lot more boundless, if something, than just the physical ways that we may tend to think of these things. Another reference is made in this koan to that they say it's like a person at night sleeping who's groping for a pillow, right? And so if you think about groping for a pillow, and Roshi talks about this in his commentary as well, that maybe your head's filled off the pillow a little bit, and you just kind of reach and grab the pillow and adjust it, and you're not being discriminating as this is a cotton pillow, or this is a down pillow, or this has a very satin type of cloth, or this has a silk pillowcase or whatever. You're just grabbing the pillow, and you're doing it without putting any conscious thought into it. You're just doing what needs to be done. And I think this is quite illustrative of compassion, not in a cerebral standpoint, like the example used before, when I would have a thought, and I still do, time for me to go to blood, that's something I need to do. Nothing wrong with that, but there is a certain element of at times thinking about that, as opposed to just something that needs to be done. There are all kinds of things that need to be done in each moment, and I can be attentive to those things, and that can be very compassionate. And some of those things might be viewed by others as being more compassionate, or for me, or for other people, or whatever. But in reality, it's just doing whatever the next thing is that needs to be done. And so that's this idea of groping for the pillow, and having also this pillows, certainly points to kind of an intimate connection. This person's sleeping, they wake up from their sleep, they adjust their pillow, and it's all done effortlessly. The example that it gets talked about fairly frequently in Zen, particularly maybe in Colorado, is that when we are doing something like skiing down a mountain, and we're just doing it. We're not thinking at all. We're just the skiing. We're not a person skiing. We're just the skiing, and there's really no individual thing going on there. There's just this reality of experiencing, right? And the same thing is, instead of just using that as a skiing example, we can use an example too of being loving, compassionate individuals and doing what needs to be done. In our life, as we get more tuned into this, we see so many examples of compassion being played out all the time, in subtle ways, in obvious ways, in between ways, and we as we awake and are more tuned into it, and more expressive of our own loving connections with everyone, and feeling more connected to people, and also feeling our own pain and feeling the pain of the universe, like the example in this koan of Avalokiteshvara. There's so many examples of it, and it's the interesting thing too is as we open up more, put our shields down, if you will, into the Star Wars analogy, our shields down from trying to protect us and worrying about how to control life to where it's easy for us. As we put those shields away and open up our hearts more and more, the compassion just will flow. I'm sure we've all experienced this. Flow more and more and more, and as we also do that, it enables us to open our own hearts up even more and be more willing to take a risk with some of the difficulties and challenges in the world today, and with our personal relationships, and with our relationships with insentients and plants, and different of the thousands of things that Dogen talks about in that verse about to study the self is to forget the self and then be enlightened by the 10,000 ways, 10,000 things. When I think I've been practicing about five or 6 years, and Shishin Roshi's book, the Book of Equanimity, came out at that time, and I got a copy of that book from him, and he signed it. And again, I was reasonably new to practice at that time. I'd say I'd been sitting with the center here for maybe 5 years or so. But in the inscription of in his writing where he signed his name, he wrote a little note, just brief. And the note was literally, the great function is everywhere. How could there be any hindrance? The great function is everywhere. How could there be any hindrance? And when I got that, at first I saw, oh, he signed the book, that's neat. And then I read this thing, and it made a real impact on me, big impact on me. And I didn't know necessarily what all was meant by that by any stretch, but there was a visceral reaction of, wow, this great function, and this great function that's everywhere. Wonder what that is all about. And then this notion of, so how could there be any hindrance? And also, I didn't have a lot of intellectual thought about this at the time. I just experienced this thing when I read those words. And then later, years later, when I was going through this particular koan in the Book of Equanimity, as part of my koan study, I saw in the appreciatory verse of that koan, the fact that that line about this great function being everywhere, how could there be any hindrance? So, how could there be any hindrance if we're everything, and we're completely connected with everything, and we're not separate from anything, and even what we talk about as the relative also is everything. It's the absolute as much. It's not really a dichotomy there. So how could there be any hindrance? How could there be any hindrance? Well, in my practice, I know there can be a lot of hindrances that I create. Lots of things that I'm not comfortable with. Lots of things that I'm not willing to open up to in every moment. Sometimes, for whatever reason, I may push certain things away. I may shy away from certain things. I may not be willing to open up to certain people or situations, or pain or suffering or illness or death of a loved one or whatever it might be. All these different kind of things could be, in certain circumstances, extremely difficult for me to completely open up my heart to. And yet that is what these teachings are encouraging us to do, is to let the barriers down, not to push these things away, to open up our hearts to everything. And another example here, I'll take my rakusu off for just a second. When I got this rakusu during Dharma transmission, there was a verse that was put on the back of this by the Roshis that really made a huge impression on me, and it relates to what we're talking about today. It says, "The ocean of compassion is vast. The source of healing is not hidden. Since your heart functions completely, how could there be any hindrance?" How could there be any hindrance? So if our heart did truly function completely, if we opened up our heart to everything that's going on, not to condone everything, it's not a matter of condoning or not condoning, but to open up and be experiencing whatever is going on in this moment, then how could there be any hindrance, right? How could there be any hindrance? And when I saw this on the back of my rakusu years later, I remembered again the quote that he had put in that book, and I thought, oh wow, that he had one line in the book that related to all of this about this ocean, this vast ocean of compassion that each one of us is, just like we're each Buddhas, right? We're each Buddhas, and at times we can cover that up. Or try to cover it up. But really, when that gets stripped away, as we more and more in our Zen practice open up to more and more and more and more and push away less and less, we get closer and closer to being able to be this vast ocean of compassion. So, you have this ability to have a very, very intimate experience with things. It's this intimate practice that we talked about last time, but it's an intimate practice, but then manifests in this ocean of compassion, of being there for everything, for every situation, for everyone, and for ourselves. Last weekend, during our session, we had a beautiful ceremony, and it was the ceremony for two new Dharma holders in our sangha, and Myozan and Echo, and it was very short ceremony. There was a beautiful poem that was shared during that ceremony from the Roshis, and one of the things that was mentioned was that, okay, now as Dharma holders, and the same could be said of all of us, any practitioner, is that our service and the focus on service as Zen practitioners is to the three treasures, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And that's a nice, simple way with huge ramifications as far as guidance on how to live our life, and in a compassionate way. And I don't know, I think most of us have been to a Jukai ceremony before, where somebody takes the precepts, and that was reminding me of Myozan and Echo becoming Dharma holders. There was always something to me when I've been at like this Dharma holder ceremony or a Jukai ceremony that is so tugs on my heartstrings, and on heartstrings I think of others, because you see people a lot of times at Jukai ceremonies with tears coming down streaming down their cheeks, and it's just, there's something so beautiful and elegant and intimate and compassionate about some of these ceremonies that just highlight aspects of our practice and bring us all so close together as a sangha. And of course, the wonderful thing is that can go out into the world too, when we're at Safeway scanning our grocery items or something like that, and talking to somebody or running into them, and just feeling this sense of kinship and intimacy in all kinds of ways. There was another story that Shishin shared one time, talking about having a compassionate view of this world and of our existence and the preciousness of this existence. And it had to do with a monk that he met quite a number of years ago. I think at Zen Center, maybe it was in Los Angeles. But anyway, he was a Vietnamese monk, and Roshi was asking him about his practice. And he said, really, my practice is all about three things. I'm thinking, well, maybe the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, what's it going to be in this case? But he says, it's three things. It's that I see everyone as the Buddha, I see everything as the Dharma, and I see every place as nirvana. Every place is nirvana. And that's a pretty, in one sense, simple, and yet also very wonderful and beautiful way to live our life, for him to live that life. And so it's made an impression on me. It's certainly been something that ever since I first heard Roshi share that story, that made quite quite an impact on me, and setting the bar pretty high on how to try to relate to people. But ultimately our lives, they're very short, they're very fleeting. Some of you know I used to work in hospice and was made very aware every day of how fleeting life is, how transient it is. And what a wonderful opportunity we have in this short time that we all have, whether we live to be 104 or whether we live to be 4. It's not very long. And these moments are so precious, and we have so many opportunities to share with each other in a loving way, be compassionate with each other. When I worked for a corporation for many years, a large organization, and in that organization, I used to say to the sales team and everybody that worked that there are like literally 10,000 opportunities you're going to have each day. I don't know how they came up with 10,000, but we'll use that. 10,000 opportunities each day in the way you interact with somebody to make a positive or a neutral or a negative kind of interaction with somebody. And of course, they were talking about it more from a sales perspective of what that could do for the company. But it wasn't just about for sales. It was also part of the idea of really trying to be there for people and be helpful. And that would tie over to the way it was when they were selling their product. And I thought at the time, wow, 10,000, that's an exaggeration. But it's not an exaggeration. There are countless ways that we relate to, whether it's right now, my feet on this carpet, or seeing your faces, whether it's at home or here in the Abbey, all kinds of relationships I have with insentient things like this pen that I'm holding in my hand right now, or setting it back down on the table, and the relationship with the table, the relationship with all of you, the closeness, the intimacy I can feel with relationships with all of you. So it just underscores the in this very short life, not to take much for granted, because there's so much to appreciate in all kinds of ways, whether sentience, insentience, or friends, whatever it might be. So again, as I close out every I'll talk with, that we do live our life of the Buddha. Each one of us, without exception, is the Buddha, and we can uncover that more and more and more, and open up our hearts more and more and more. And we're all living the Buddha life, and that includes sweeping the floors, or cleaning the toilets, or giving a helping hand to someone, or reading a book, or going to the bathroom, peeing, pooping, all these things. That is the Buddha's life, and it's all that we are, and it is all so precious. It's all so precious, and we can be compassionate with all those things and what we're all dealing with together, and pull together. And we are so lucky in our practice to have a Sangha here that we can lean on, and that can nurture us, and we can nurture together, and that we can experience these sorts of things, whether it's folks at home bringing us into all of your homes, which is such a special gift of sharing, and likewise that we're sharing here at the Abbey with all of you too.